A Huntingburg company is cutting back its workforce. More on that, plus more on city budgets and how they'll affect the upcoming election, and Democratic Huntingburg Mayor candidate Ron Drew wraps up our Meet the Candidates series. All of that and much more is up next here on the 18 WJTS News. Hello, I'm Bradford Raths. A Huntingburg-based mining company says it will cut nearly 140 employees across all of its operations. In a worker adjustment and retraining notification notice sent to the Indiana Department of Workforce Development, United Minerals Company LLC will permanently eliminate up to 138 jobs across all of its locations. Company officials say the cuts will occur sometime between December 31st of this year and mid-January of next year. Now, United Minerals says all of its employees have been notified about the job cuts. In the WARN notice, United Minerals President Greg Olinger says the job cuts are necessary in light of a reduction in coal sales and the anticipation of further reduction in demand. United Minerals LLC has several locations across southwestern Indiana. In addition to the Huntingburg offices, the company has offices in Linville, mines in Linville, Oakland City, Elberfeld, and Boonville, a dock facility in Newburgh, a river terminal in Evansville, and a Linville wash plant. A Huntingburg man ended up in jail overnight after police found him intoxicated at a local gas station convenience store. Just before 7:40 last night, HPD was called to Casey's General Store in the 300 block of South Main Street on a reportedly intoxicated person. After entering the store, officers found 52-year-old Michael Flatt sitting on a chair next to one of the store's employees who was helping to keep him from falling over. The store clerks told police that Flatt had staggered through several aisles of the store prior to employees sitting him in the chair. While investigating further, police found an empty vehicle running with the door wide open in the parking lot. Police determined that Flatt had also driven drunk to get to the store. A portable breath test found his BAC to be 0.19%, and a later blood draw at Memorial Hospital found it to be 0.2%. Flatt was taken and booked into the Du Bois County Security Center. He's facing misdemeanor counts for OWI and public intoxication. Budgeting remains one of the top concerns in the upcoming Jasper mayor's race. Of course, the city had to cut $900,000 from its proposed 2016 budget to get numbers to line up before it was passed. Then earlier this week, Mayor Terry Seitz unveiled his plan for budgeting the city's economic development income tax, or EDIT funds. That plan calls for goals of leveraging city EDIT funds, sustaining a healthy EDIT reserve, and projecting the potential EDIT funds that might be available for bonding. Now, the plan drew the ire of members of the Jasper City Council, including Councilman Kevin Manley. Manley stated during Monday's announcement that the 5-year timeline that the plan outlined is a very tall order for the city to follow.
It is very difficult to run a city and look out 3 years and say we're going to have this amount of money, because there's a lot of things that are happening behind the scenes that have to be discussed, because running the city is the very first thing that we're supposed to do. That's our job. Okay? So you can plan out 5 years, but 5 years from now, that may not be anything that's remotely accurate to what you're doing.
Throughout his campaign, Democratic mayoral challenger Wayne Sheeter has argued for more responsible city spending all across the board. Sheeter says tax dollars are the most basic of public trusts, and there are several different challenges that need to be taken into consideration.
With the tax cap, the growth of tax revenues is going to be limited. So I think Jasper's been fortunate in that we haven't felt the squeeze of the tax cap and increased cost. And think going forward, you need to really make sure you take into consideration any future development, any developments going on, what is going to be the impact on future costs before you make the final decision.
Seitz argues his EDIT plan is a step in the right direction when it comes to city budgeting. He says the city needs to look further ahead than just 1 year at a time during the budget cycle.
Well, if we just look at it on a project-by-project basis or an as-needed basis, we fail. I want to look at long-term forecasting and trending, and I need to have the clerk treasurer's office and elected officials on board with me, because we have to look at that, not just because the property tax fund, the general fund's tighter because of capping, but because we can do better things other than building up massive reserves.
The city is projected to spend around $1.2 million of its EDIT reserves in 2016. That reserve is currently at $4.7 million, according to clerk treasurer Juanita Boehm. We're now in the last couple of days for residents to be able to vote early in this year's city elections. Early voting continued today and will continue tomorrow and Monday at the Du Bois County Courthouse from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. The early voting tomorrow will only run from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Satellite voting locations will also be running their course this weekend. Locations at the Huntingburg Event Center and the Ferdinand Community Center will be open from 8 a.m. until noon tomorrow. The Huntingburg location had hours from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. today as well. Now, whether you want to vote early or on Election Day, you will have to show a valid photo ID before you can cast your vote. Any further questions, you can call the Du Bois County Clerk's office at 812-481-7035. The Du Bois County Emerging Leaders are reminding everyone about the submission deadline for their grant nominations. Of course, that deadline was the end of business today. Any 501c3 nonprofit in Du Bois County is eligible to submit their nomination. Emerging Leaders were encouraged to nominate their favorite organizations. The Emerging Leaders group is gearing up for this year's granting party, which is set for Thursday, November 12th at 6 o'clock at Hettinger Beverage in Jasper. Those on hand will get free food, free beer, and a chance to vote for this year's Emerging Leaders grant winner. The winning organization gets a $5,000 grant. Mentors for Youth was last year's grant winner. You are being asked to RSVP if you will be attending, and you can do so by emailing engage@dccommunityfoundation.org. 3 people are being treated for serious injuries following a 2-vehicle crash that involved an on-duty Warwick County Sheriff's Office detective. The Sheriff's Office says the crash happened at around 7 o'clock Central Time last night along State Road 62 in Chandler when Detective Tim Pierce attempted to turn left and failed to notice a vehicle heading the other direction. It says the unmarked squad car driven by Pierce struck the driver's side of the other vehicle. Pierce, the other driver, 52-year-old Scott Elliott, and his mother, 71-year-old Shirley Elliott, both of Evansville, were taken to a hospital with serious injuries. Both vehicles were totaled in the crash. And finally tonight, Congress has approved a new budget that was done early this morning, with the Senate giving its approval at around 1 a.m. by a final vote of 64 to 35. Democrat Senator Joe Donnelly of Indiana says it'll increase domestic and defense program spending by about $80 billion over the next 2 years, and raising the debt ceiling was something that needed to happen. Half of that $80 billion goes to domestic spending and the other half goes to defense. The move also helps the government avoid a first-ever default, which was just a few days away from happening. The default deadline has now been pushed back to March of 2017. Now, during a recent stop here in Jasper, 8th District Congressman Larry Bouchon stated the biggest thing that will be needed at this point to control spending down the road is long-run changes to key parts of the budget.
We don't necessarily need to make specific cuts. What we need to do is we really need to reform our mandatory spending programs. That's about 60% of the budget, and those are things that are programs that we all know that are critical, that we need to have in place. Social Security, Medicare, those are really programs that need reformed for the 21st century so that they provide the services that needed, but do it in a way that's sustainable. And until we do that, I tell you, we're not going to get control of the federal budget.
On that note, the government has spent the largest part of its fiscal year 2015 budget on health care, according to spending figures the government has posted. Health care makes up more than $1 trillion of the 2015 budget. The 2016 projected plan has been projected to be right at $4 trillion. All right, coming up after the break, Ron Drew sits down with Bill Potter for Meet the Candidates. We're back after this.